Good evening, Mr. Bond fans, and welcome once again to a continuation of my video series looking at the continuation James Bond novels. Last time we looked at Colonel Sun, written by Kingsley Amis, which I thought was fantastic. I had a really great time with that book, and unfortunately, the series did not continue with Amis writing any more books. He only wrote the one, and for a good long while there was nothing continuing the adventures of the literary 007 until John Pearson came along. So Pearson already had some history with Ian Fleming himself. He worked with Fleming at the Sunday Times and in 1966 actually published a biography on the author, so I guess this qualifies him well to go into writing a James Bond novel. But being largely a writer of non-fiction and biographies, we have James Bond, the Authorized Biography of 007, which audaciously claims that the secret agent that Fleming wrote about was actually a real bloke, and the novel proceeds to give us his full life story. So I'm not gonna go into this review with my usual categories of like plot, Bond, supporting characters versus the films and such, because I feel like I just kind of need to talk about this one as a whole because it's so different to what we've previously talked about. But just to give you an idea of the plot, John Pearson is a biographer who published a biography on Ian Fleming, and when I say this, I don't mean John Pearson in real life, I mean John Pearson in the book itself, because John Pearson is actually a character in this story. So John Pearson discovers that James Bond actually exists, and is convinced to write a biography on the spy, and meets with the old agent, and has him reel off his life story over the course of several days and nights, and the book flips between Pearson and Bond talking, and, we then get passages which describe Bond on adventures, and his life events of the past and such, and it essentially reads like a collection of short stories with these sort of like bookends of, the two characters, Pearson and Bond, talking. However, and my first big criticism about this particular book is that the Bond that we have here isn't really the Bond of the Fleming books. I mean, part of the premise is that the character that Fleming wrote about was an exaggeration of a real man, and that man is the man who John Pearson is interviewing. So really, the Bond here is a completely different character to the one that we are used to reading about. So this is what I knew going in, and I have to admit that I'm already skeptical before I even start reading. I mean, as I think you probably gathered from my Colonel Sun review, I have no problem with this creation being given a new life by new people. I don't think a character should have to die with its original author, and Colonel Sun proved that another author can retain the spirit of the original and we can have a good time with it. However, when you take that creation and say that things that the original author decided were incorrect or exaggerated for effect, or don't really represent the truth, then I don't really know what the point is of doing it. Surely the selling point of a James Bond biography is that we have a biography of the character we all know and experience the adventures of for 15 books now. Or, if Fleming actually did base the adventures of 007 on one specific real person, then that would make for an interesting biography. Obviously that would be non-fiction, but it would still be a hell of a lot more interesting than this weird halfway house, because otherwise I don't really care about this Bond, this fictional man that Ian Fleming based his fictional creation on. And then the book actually has, the audacity to say things like, there are several times in the book where Fleming's writings are dismissed as oh, that was an exaggeration, or, it's over such weird details as well, like Bond skiing. We know from Octopussy, the short story, that a man named Oberhauser taught Bond to ski, and then in this book it's well, of course that was made up, Bond knew how to ski long before he met Oberhauser, and the events of the Moonraker novel are completely written out of continuity completely. Literally that story never happened. I also just find the whole, fourth wall breaking thing very annoying and very childish. It annoyed me when Fleming did it in the end of You Only Live Twice with Bond's obituary, but at least that just felt like a little gag, a little Easter egg at the end, but not the premise of an entire very long novel. The book is basically 2/3 of Bond pre-Casino Royale, and then the final third has Bond kind of rambling off stories about, his experiences in between between the Fleming books, and I thought that this was some of the more interesting stuff in the whole book, if I'm being honest. I mean, there are nice little bits that we kind of like learn about, like, you know, what happened with Tiffany Case at the end of after the end of Diamonds Are Forever. But then I guess it's like, we've already established that this Bond that John Pearson is interviewing is not actually the same character that Fleming was writing about in Diamonds Are Forever, so why do I care about this character who just had his experiences exaggerated? Like, because it's like, well, if his experiences aren't actually the same as the experiences of the Bond that I've read about in the Fleming books, then it's not the same character, so why do I care? Similarly, like, Honey Rider appears in the present-day bits with Bond and Pearson, and she's Honey in name only. Like, it's just not the same character that we read about in Doctor No. And, you know, I understand that characters can evolve and change, and authors should have the creative license to take things in their own direction. It just gets really icky when you're sticking so close to that original creation and kind of like leeching off it and trying to fit within that continuity. And yet you're also saying that, oh well, it's not actually real, that what you read before isn't real, that original creation is not real, this is. How Pearson writes Bond as well is just kind of annoying, because he's saying like, oh, this isn't the Bond that Fleming wrote about, and yet he is just writing, you know, that character, but just making him boring, which just isn't very engaging. If there wasn't this whole thing in the book about the Bond here not being the Bond that we know, I probably wouldn't be enjoying this a lot more, because Pearson goes into some really, like, minute detail about the character. But the thing is, he's not writing the character that I liked from all those other books, he's writing something else. It feels inauthentic to me, because such a wealth of detail about a character's life should come from the original author, and I'm fine with other authors taking what Fleming did and continuing on from it, building on it, and maybe peppering in some little details as we go on about his past here and there, but to produce this entire thing and say, this is it, this is James Bond's biography, it just doesn't sit right with me. All that being said, I think there are some good short stories in here, and to be honest, I really just wish that this had been a collection of short stories. I mean, you know, marketed as, you know, being early Bond adventures rather than anything as grand as a biography. The Ian Fleming adventures are all referenced in the book, I mean, along with Colonel Sun, and Pearson's knowledge and recall of the character and the series is encyclopedic and very impressive. I mean, all the references are spot on, but I just don't have many compliments for this book beyond that. The bottom line for me with this one is that the details that Ian Fleming gave us about Bond's past in his series was exactly enough. I did not need any more than that. And I went into the Authorized Biography with some skepticism, and I wasn't proven wrong. I just don't see why any Bond fan would need to read this. I mean, Colonel Sun never felt like, you know, fan fiction, which is the lowest point that a continuation novel can reach for, and this one did. So a little bit of a downer to end on, but nonetheless, next time we're on to something different once again with a novelization by Christopher Wood based on his co-written screenplay for The Spy Who Loved Me, which I'm very excited to talk about. There is a surprisingly large amount of things to talk about with that one, so please do join me for that one. I swear it's going to be a little bit more positive than this. And in the meantime, if there are any fans of the Authorized Biography out there, please do let me know in the comment section below. I know from like just talking to Bond fans about it before writing this review that it does have fans out there, and you know, I'm really curious to know like what you get out of it, so please do let me know in the comment section below. As always, please head over to my Twitter, my Facebook pages, and if you would like to go one step further in supporting this channel, then also head over to my Patreon page for details on how to do so there. But in the meantime, Bond fans, so long for now.